Hello, and welcome to Stuff and Things with Chris. I am your host, Chris. So, today we're going to get into some sports. Now, not real sports, because nobody's playing those anywhere. In fact, I can't even go watch middle school baseball at the local middle school across the street and yell at the players about how they need to put more arch in their back to generate a bigger curve and how they're never going to make it in the majors. Because they're not even doing that. Can't watch any sports of any kind anywhere. But don't worry, I have some shows for you to binge watch on Netflix that do have to do with sports. Just as an added bonus, some of these are your non-traditional sports. They may be things you're not really familiar with, but that doesn't mean these shows aren't good. They are still good. So, we're going to get into it right now. Fearless. Now this show is about professional bull riders. Now you want a hard job? Riding a 3,000-pound bull for 8 seconds and hopefully not dying is a pretty tough one. This show is a real-life kind of in-the-life of documentary. It follows professional bull riders over the course of one season of competition. Now, these are guys who just do bull riding. They don't do anything else. And there's a whole circuit that is just bull riding. It's called the PBR. And they compete for pretty large checks, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They get $1 million at the end if they win the whole season. This is a really interesting show because it really gets into the mindset of these guys and what it takes to do this. And also how hard it is, because if you don't get a ride all the way, you don't get paid. You only get paid based on your results. Now, some of these guys will have successful guys who have, won some bull riding events in the past. They may get some contracts, but most of these guys, they are paid what they earn. And so you see these guys going all over the country, even up into Canada for some of these events, and they may make $20,000 or $30,000. Now, that's a hard $20,000 to earn. You're getting stomped on, thrown around, and potentially mashed to death by a gargantuan bull. Highly recommend this series. It really gets into, why people would do this, what mindset it takes, how difficult it is, the spectacle that it has now become. I mean, PBR events are in gigantic arenas like football stadiums and stuff. 50, 60,000 people show up to watch these things. Really gives you an insight as to why. It's only one season right now, but I would check it out. I thought it was very entertaining. Next on the list is Cricket Fever, Mumbai Indians. Now, most people, especially in the U.S., are not very up on their cricket knowledge. Unless you are a person who is from a country that is England or one of the countries crushed under its colonialism, you don't have any idea what cricket is. Cricket is a sport that involves weird math and may take as much as 7 to 8 days to finish one match. It doesn't make any sense, but the people who play it are religious about it. And nowhere are people more religious about it than in India. Now, in India, cricket is the biggest sport there is. I mean, if they put the resources and the fact that they have 900 plus million people in their country into soccer, who knows how many World Cups they would have won by now. Instead, they're putting all that into cricket. So the biggest team in India is the Mumbai Indians. Now, when I say big, I mean gargantuan. Just the fact of the population of India means that this team is going to have massive amounts of followers. If you think the New York Yankees have a lot and they're a big-time franchise, or Man U or the Dallas Cowboys, man, those teams are small potatoes. Now, in the top professional league in India, cricket is played in front of 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60,000 people. It is a gargantuan spectacle. It's like a rock concert. And the guys on this team are all the super rock stars of cricket. Some of these guys have their own reality shows. They're marrying the famous actresses. They hawk every kind of product you can think of. They're paid huge amounts of money. Most of the guys on the Indian World Cup national team are from this one team, Mumbai Indians. It is hard to get on because it has the best players. It's hard to stay on because everybody behind you is trying to take your spot. These guys are really good. The show is phenomenal about getting into what it is like to be on the team and just walk down the street. It's just wacky how big it is. I kind of had to laugh at it because I don't really know that much about cricket, and it was hard for me to believe that this big a following could be about cricket. But it is. I mean, these guys are a combination of rock star Michael Jordan and President Obama, all rolled into one. I mean, every guy on the team is like that. Every guy has his own fan club. I mean, it's just out of control how humongous it is. Highly recommend you check it out. Cricket Fever, Mumbai Indians. So if you're worried about football and whether or not the coronavirus is going to cancel that season too, stop all your worrying and get your football fix on Last Chance U. Now, this is a show that follows two different junior college programs. The first one is East Mississippi Community College, and the second is Independence Community College, located in Kansas. Now, both of these schools are in tiny, tiny towns no one's ever heard of. But what they do is take players who have basically been kicked off or kicked out of Division I programs and try to get those guys back into Division I programs. So it's a really interesting program. Some of these guys were national recruits, like really famous high school players, and they made a huge splash when they signed at places like Florida State or Miami or Georgia. Okay, powerhouse football conferences had these guys. They should have gone on to become big stars, and for whatever reason, they were not able to. Their first year, they got kicked out. Maybe after their second year, they got kicked out. Some of these guys come to the community college to get their grades back up so that they can go back to a big Division I school. Some of them just don't really have it in them anymore. They just kind of get burned out and they slowly kind of fall by the wayside. Others, try as they might, can't break the bad habits that got them in trouble before. It's literally a soap opera. We're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old guys, most of them underprivileged, a lot of them inner city type guys. So there's a real dynamic there of what those guys are prepared to do to get to their goal. And every single one of these guys' goals is to play in the NFL. All of them, every single one of them. It doesn't matter what happened to them in the beginning of their college career. Some of them are even talking about, hey, you know what? I don't even need this. I can just go straight to the draft, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that kind of stuff. So it's the coaches' jobs to really single out the guys that they feel will benefit the most and be able to get to a Division I school where they'll be on TV and then hopefully get drafted and then hopefully have a successful career in NFL football. Another thing this show does is really show you how how you could say the inner workings of a junior college work. Who all is involved? Okay, there's a lot of stuff with teachers here. There's a lot of stuff with guidance counselors as they're trying to help these guys along, help them get their grades, make sure they go to class, make sure their grades are good enough, take any tests that they didn't take before, like SATs, ACTs, things like that. And they're really focused on helping these kids out. Now, in the local communities, the football teams are big. They, everybody in the town comes to these games. But there's a little animosity locally because, you know, it's a community college, yet hardly any of the football players are actually from the community. They're all from, you know, states real far away. They've been recruited to come here, basically. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic from that sense. Both of these community colleges are in tiny, tiny little towns in the middle of nowhere. And so some of these players who come from big cities and then we're at gigantic universities have a real hard time transitioning to that. This is a great show. The drama on it is off the chart. And because it's a real show, they will introduce you to all these players and you think to yourself, gee, whatever happened to that guy? And you can type their name into the internet and it'll show you where they are now. Hopefully some of them are in the NFL. There's a few of them that are. There's one guy in particular who last I heard was in the NFL, but not at any position related to what he was doing at East Mississippi Community College. He was a quarterback there. I think he ended up playing defense for the Bears. He got a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if he's still on their roster or not. It really puts in perspective how hard it is for these guys to reach their goals of being successful NFL players, and how a lot of times the expectations built up on these guys in high school are not realistic, and they're not going to get there. And some of them have a real hard time realizing that. This is a great show. Now, the real stars are the two coaches, and they are both pretty foul-mouthed dudes. So while there's a lot of language in this, it's probably not for kids. In particular, the coach, the third and fourth season from Independence, he is a guy from Long Beach, California, who grew up in the hood. Now, he's a white guy who grew up in the hood. So you can imagine that he's a little tougher than your average white guy, and he acts like it. He plays no games with anyone. Coaches, teachers, presidents, players, fans. He don't care. He'll yell at anybody. So that's interesting because both of these coaches spend a lot of time in front of the camera when they're calm, talking about how they wish they could control their emotions and they just kind of fly off the handle. And they both struggle immensely with it. It's a great show. Highly recommend it. That's Last Chance U. Losers. It's an interesting series. Each episode deals with a particular athlete who either was famous for losing or was famous because they were in a scandal, or sometimes both. And how did they deal with that? Particularly, this show is dealing with the aftermath of whatever it was that made them a loser. Now, one of the guys in this show is Jean Van de Velde. If you don't know who that is, he is a professional golfer. Now, he had been playing for a while. He had a chance to win the British Open. This is a while back, like 15 or 20 years ago. And he had a huge lead with 2 holes left, and he got an 8 or maybe a 9 on the 17th hole, the second to the last hole, and ended up losing the tournament. So it was the biggest collapse in the history of professional golf. So these are the kind of stories we're talking about. It's not just people who lose. It's people who lose enormously. Now, a great thing about this show is it's very positive. It shows all these people and what has become of them. What has happened to them? Do they have any successes in life now? Did being a loser haunt them for a long time? And the usual answer for all these people is no, they're perfectly fine now. They have found success in other ways. Most of them never even think about what happened to them and when they were quote unquote famous. It's really interesting. It's a very positive vibe. I highly recommend checking this show out. It's only one season. I think it's like 8 episodes long. Really cool. I liked it a lot. Next is Basketball or Nothing. This is a very good show. It is set on the Navajo Nation, and it describes one particular high school's basketball team and their journey to try to get to the state championship game. Now, the way the Navajo Nation works, it's the largest U.S. Native American reservation. It has a huge amount of land in Arizona and New Mexico and a little bit in Colorado. And each part of the reservation basically has its own population. They're kind of spread out. And in each one of those groups, there's their own high school. They all play in their own league, the Navajo Nation League. And then the winner of that league then plays in the state tournament against other public schools from Arizona. And so we follow this one team, and they have not done real well in the past, and they're trying to kind of jumpstart their program, and they hire a basketball coach who has experience coaching Native American teams and non-Native American teams. And he brings his own philosophy that has worked. He has won state titles before, and he's going to try to implement it at the school. Now, the problem he runs into is that on this reservation, they play what the high school players call res ball. And res ball is a wheels off, out of control, all offensive basketball style. There is no defense, there is no passing, there are no set offenses. It's literally like blacktop basketball. Just anything goes, really. So when he gets there, he immediately has to change all of this because you can't win a state title playing that way. The guys have a lot of resistance to this. They know who he is, they know his pedigree, but it is hard to get that out of them. That's how they know how to play, that's how they want to play. It's really a real-time, real-life Hoosiers. The beginning of that movie, Gene Hackman's trying to get all those little farm boys from Indiana to stop chucking the ball from the cheap seats, and nobody passes, and nobody plays defense. This is the same thing. It's very interesting. You get a really up-close view of how these guys on the team deal with life every day in the Navajo Nation. These guys are in the lowest income bracket there is. And how can they get out of the situation they're in? College. And how can they get into college? Basketball. So that's where the title of the series comes from, Basketball or Nothing. If they can catch the eye of a college scout, they have a chance to go to college. Very few Native Americans from the Navajo reservation leave the Navajo Nation and go to college. So you learn all the names of all these kids. It follows them to their homes. It follows them away from their home, what they have to do every day, even before they get to school, what they have to do after school, how they practice, what their goals are. It's really a very interesting show. It follows all the way. It follows these guys even into the spring after basketball is over, and they're trying to make their decisions as to whether or not they can get into college. Basketball games are edited really well, so you get a lot of tension built up in those. A lot of the games are really close. It's a really fun series to watch. I enjoyed it. Each episode is only like 30 minutes long, so you can binge the whole season in just 2 or 3 hours. I found it really entertaining. Highly recommend it. One of the top programs on Netflix. Very good. Lastly, I'm going to cover my favorite sports show on Netflix. This is Formula One Drive to Succeed. Now, this follows the real-life Formula One season of 2018 and 2018. So each one of those is its own series. Now, they were in the middle of doing the startup for Season 3, 2020, when before the season even started, they shut it all down in early February. So hopefully, if they restart the Formula One season later on, they'll start the documentary along with it. This is a great show. I'm going to tell you what, I didn't know a whole lot about what goes on in the Formula One racing when I decided to watch it. But man, the characters in this show, what it takes to build a team, all the people that are involved in it, the hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent. It's really interesting. The prima donna drivers arguing with everyone they can get hold of. It's really entertaining. A lot of these guys are funny. Now, of course, it involves people from all over the world. They have drivers from pretty much every country you can think of except the U.S. And that's because there are 10 teams in Formula One. it is one of the most difficult sports to be a professional at because there are only 20 drivers. Okay. And Lewis Hamilton, who has won the last 5 world championships, is not quitting and not giving you his seat in the car. So it makes it incredibly difficult to get into Formula One. But it also means that if you are down on the end of the scale, it's very easy to be replaced. Okay, the teams are always looking for the next young guy, and I'm talking 17, 18, 19 years old. They're looking for that next dude they can put in that chair who's going to ride for them for years. One of the most interesting things about this is how the Formula One, I guess you would say, teams shake out. There are 3 that compete for the top spot every year: Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. Now, Mercedes and Red Bull have a very long history in Formula One, going back over 100 years. Red Bull does not, maybe 20 years. But for a period of time in the early 2010s, they won 4 world championships in a row. When they started their team, they threw a whole bunch of money at it. They built the best car, they bought the best parts, they hired the best driver, and they went for broke, and it worked. They have a gargantuan budget. Ferrari and Mercedes have even bigger budgets, and we're talking about build cars good. The cars cost tens of millions of dollars. These are not stock cars. Okay, these are highly precision engineered devices with tested in wind tunnels and all kinds of wackiness. Computer driven parts everywhere. Most of them are hand machined. And so these mid-tier teams, all they're trying to do is get to 4th. Okay. And those are teams with names you might have heard of, like McLaren, Renault. There's one American team called Haas Racing. Now, that's from the NASCAR guy. Also has a NASCAR team called Haas Racing, and he bought a F1 team, so they've only been in existence 3 years. So success is hard to come by in Formula One. You know, it's very interesting watching how they prepare for each race because each track is different, and therefore you need a whole different setup for the car. You know, does it turn faster, brake harder? The inner workings of the actual teams are amazing to see. The guys in charge of the teams overall, the team directors, these guys are the face of the racing team. They do all the press conferences. They do all the hiring. They do all the firing. It's very interesting watching these guys do their jobs and what they're trying to get accomplished. The amount of mechanics and engineers involved with these cars is amazing. The best part is the drivers. They're all prima donnas. They all think they're going to win the world championship, not just one race. They're all in it to win the world title. They're all going to win the world title one day. They're all going to win every single race. If they don't, it's always someone else's fault. They will blame the owner. They will blame the team. They will blame the guys who set up the car. They will blame even the drivers on their own team. Some of these teams, the 2 drivers hate each other, and they're racing against each other in every race. And there's weird situations where they try to just run each other off the road and end up wrecking both cars. And then the team has no cars that even finish in the points. And the team director gets furious and yells at everybody. I mean, it's really off the chain. Okay. It is phenomenally good. It's like a soap opera, only with cars that go 200 miles an hour. So it's pretty entertaining. This is a huge sport. This is a $1 billion sport. Even though it only has 10 teams, there are hundreds of thousands of people who come out to watch these races. They line the track for miles all the way around it, and 20, 30, 50 people deep. Highly recommend it. By far my pick for the best sports show on Netflix. Again, more stuff to binge. Now, if you think of anything that I left off or something you like that I didn't talk about, leave it in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you know when I have new reviews coming out. and I will see you later.